Good evening and welcome back to the Ways After Dark version. And we will call the meeting back to order. And we will pick up where we left off with Assembly Bill 491. You gave me that look like, what's wrong with you? Good evening and welcome back.
Good evening. Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the committee. For the record, Andrew Klinger, Chief Financial Officer for the Nevada System of Higher Education, here to present Assembly Bill 491. The intent of Assembly Bill 491 is to keep the three institutions in the bill, Great Basin College, College of Southern Nevada, and Truckee Meadows Community College at their adjusted base level of funding based on the caseload growth calculations in the funding formula. Without this one-time funding, these institutions' final appropriation for the biennium would actually fall below the adjusted base budget. This funding is there to help them retain the faculty and staff as their enrollment recovers. And based on the joint subcommittee's closing of the NCHE budgets, the bill does need to be amended to match the closing actions of the joint subcommittee. And Madam Chair, I'm happy to go through those numbers if you'd like me to.
Yes, please.
So for Great Basin College, the number changes from 420,503 to 419,555. For the College of Southern Nevada, in Section 2, the amount changes from 11,560,948 to 12,139,324. And for Truckee Meadows Community College, the amount changes from 593,495 to 1,012,772. And Madam Chair, I did confirm with your staff yesterday that they have the same numbers.
Big changes. Okay. There was also an additional amendment submitted. Have you seen that amendment?
Madam Chair, I have seen, for the record, Andrew Klinger, Chief Financial Officer for System of Higher Education. I have seen that amendment. If the committee was inclined to include that amendment, the numbers in that amendment do need to be adjusted as well.
Okay, and if we are inclined to include that amendment, what would those numbers need to be at?
Madam Chair, for Western Nevada Community College, the amount should be $297,917. And for Nevada State College, it would be $855,490. And I have not confirmed those numbers with your fiscal staff, so hopefully they have the same thing.
Okay. Members, any questions for the presenter on the initial bill, the amended numbers that he explained tonight, and on the amendment? We're going to give them all a second. They're looking at it all. Members, the second amendment is on Nella's, submitted by the row group. Exhibits for today's hearing.
Madam Chair.
Go ahead.
For the record, Chief Financial Officer Andrew Klinger, and essentially what the amendment does is it puts back in the funding for those two institutions that was lost, I guess, is the way to put it, from going from option 1 in joint subcommittee closing to option 3. So that's essentially what those calculations are.
Thank you. Any questions? I am not seeing any. Okay, I am going to thank you for the presentation. And I will invite anyone that's here in the audience that'd like to testify in support of Assembly Bill 491 to come up to the table. Good evening.
Hi, good evening. Kyle Dalpy, President, Western Nevada College. I appreciate your support of this bill, Assembly Bill 491, to help make the institutions whole in the budget formula process, and I appreciate the support in particular for the amendment that includes my college, Western Nevada College, as well as Nevada State. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Anthony Ruiz with Nevada State College. Just want to note that we are support of the original bill as drafted, but are in a similar position as Western Nevada College on this, so I thought that was important to put that on the record as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Doug Unger, D-O-U-G-U-N-G-E-R, Nevada Faculty Alliance. The Nevada Faculty Alliance supports AB 491 and the restoration of funding for our community colleges. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no one else here in Carson City that would like to testify in support, we'll go down to Las Vegas, and I'm only seeing one person in the room. If you're there to testify in support of Assembly Bill 491, I invite you to step up to the table. Seeing no movement. BPS, do we have anyone joining us on the phone line that would like to testify in support of Assembly Bill 491?
Chair, the line is up and working, but there are no callers at this time.
Thank you so much. Then we'll move to opposition. Is there anyone here in Carson City that would like to testify in opposition of Assembly Bill 491? I invite you to step up to the table. Seeing none. Not seeing anyone at the table in Las Vegas. BPS, do we have anyone on our phone lines at the time?
Chair, there are no callers at this time.
Perfect. With that, we will move to the position of neutral. If there's anyone that would like to testify in the position of neutral on Assembly Bill 491, I invite you to the table. Not seeing any here in Carson City, and no one coming to the table there in Las Vegas. And knowing that there's no one on our phone line, I'll ask the presenter if you have any closing comments before we close the hearing. All right, seeing none, then we will close the hearing on Assembly Bill 491. And we will open the hearing on Assembly Bill 494. And welcome back.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, Andrew Klinger, Chief Financial Officer for the Nevada System of Higher Education, here to present Assembly Bill 494. Assembly Bill 494 is a one-shot appropriation to the University of Nevada, Reno. The purpose of the one-shot is, as UNR acquired Sierra Nevada University, they incorporated those SNU students into their student body, and in doing so, because of the timing of that transaction, those students and the weighted, what we call the weighted student credit hours in the funding formula, did not come with those students just because of the timing of that transaction. So what this bill would do is recognize the 4,745 weighted student credit hours that were generated from students at SNU, and these are all students who enrolled at UNR in the fall of 2022 because the formula didn't recognize them. So based on that weighted student credit hour, that would generate $791,915 each year. And then in addition to that, there is an adjustment for research space that's dedicated at the SNU campus, and so that's 3,342 square feet, which then generates the $32,852 per year. So between those two items, for 2 years of the biennium, that gets you to the $1.6 million. So this is essentially a one-time adjustment to recognize those students that didn't end up in the funding formula that were at SNU and are now enrolled at University of Nevada, Reno.
And you have no amendments for this bill yourself?
I do not,
Okay.
Madam Chair.
There was another amendment submitted. Have you seen that amendment?
I have not.
That amendment essentially just does the same exact thing.
It pretty much does the same thing that in the hearing on 491, it put the same language into this bill as well. So when you saw it, you might have not realized it was too. All right, I know we do have a few questions for you, so we're going to go to Assemblywoman Bacchus first.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair, and I do have a couple questions. And Mr. Klinger, I think you may have touched on one, but I just want to confirm it because when I was at the hearing on February 21st, I recalled that the purchase occurred on July 1st, 2022. And so I get that obviously during this time period that the budgets were being prepared. So it's the number of students at Sierra were not included in the number of students for UNR when the budget was presented to us. I just wanted to confirm that.
Madam Chair, for the record, Andrew Klinger through you to Assemblywoman Bacchus. That is correct. And so normally when we do the calculation for what we call caseload growth in the formula, we use fiscal year 22 weighted student credit hours. And because that would have been through June 30th and the transaction happened on July 1st, those students were not included. And in this case, because this was an unusual circumstance, we took the extra step of adjusting those weighted student credit hours for only students that actually enrolled at UNR in the fall of 22, which we don't normally do that in the funding formula, but we did that in this case just because it was an unusual circumstance. So yes, they were not included in that original calculation.
Okay, Madam Chair, may I ask a follow-up? And then I'm not familiar with just acquiring a private institution. This is something quite new to me. And so I'm used to acquiring businesses and what that looks like. And so when UNR acquired the Sierra private institution, I mean, was there money traded? Was there a contract? I'm trying to figure out what kind of benefits UNR may have received by taking on this student population.
Madam Chair, for the record, Andrew Klinger, through you to Assemblywoman Bacchus. So a lot of it was, a big part of it, and yes, there were agreements in place that had to go to the Board of Examiners. Part of the transaction was that the assets there on the campus were actually transferred to the University of Nevada, Reno Foundation. And then essentially UNR takes over the operation of the academic programs.
I have a follow-up. That just led to another question. So I imagined all of these students just actually going to our wonderful campus here in Reno. I take it, is it the intention then, is UNR going to maintain the private infrastructure to continue educating these students? And if not, are they planning to sell the assets that they acquired?
Madam Chair, for the record, Andrew Klinger through you to Assemblywoman Bacchus. No, they plan on keeping the campus and the assets that came with the campus. And as part of the transaction, they are required to provide and I may get the words wrong here, but they're required to provide essentially a teach-out program for all of the students that were enrolled at Sierra Nevada University. Now, I don't believe that the campus in the long run is going to continue to function as a liberal arts college like it was before. I think UNR has different visions for that campus. I've heard, ideas such as executive seminars in the summer and that sort of thing, and probably Mr. Flores can maybe speak to that better than I can.
Michael Flores, University of Nevada, Reno. So in the process of this acquisition, we had to work with the Department of Education on the oversight of this acquisition, along with the Board of Regents. And we have just had commencement a few weeks ago where we had some of those students that have transitioned from SNU to the University of Nevada, Reno graduate. And I think there are still a handful of students that are still going through and have transitioned over to the university.
Madam Chair, one last question. I appreciate it. You kind of just touched on something that was my last question was, I noticed that the amount is flat between the 2 fiscal years, and I started thinking what you were thinking is obviously students are going to be graduating out. We may not have the same amount of students in both years, but the number was the same, and so I was a little confused by that if you did take into consideration the enrollment decreasing to the second year.
Madam Chair, for the record, Andrew Klinger through you to Assemblywoman Backus. So the reason it's flat for both years is we used essentially the same mechanism when we calculate caseload growth in the funding formula for other institutions. So we use that fiscal year 22 weighted student credit hour count, and then we apply that to the future fiscal years, in this case, both fiscal year 24 and 25. So it's just keeping it consistent with the funding formula, essentially.
Members, any other questions? All right, seeing none. Thank you for the presentations and the answers to the questions asked. And I'll invite anyone up to the table that would like to testify in support of Assembly Bill 494. Good evening.
Nevada Faculty Alliance, Kent Irvin, we're in support.
Short and sweet. You've been here all day. I understand. Not seeing anyone else here in Carson City to testify in support. Is there anyone in Las Vegas that would like to testify in support of Assembly Bill 494? Not seeing any. BPS, have we had anyone join us on the phone line as of yet?
Chair, the line is open and working, but there are no callers at this time.
Thank you so much. So we will go to opposition. Is there anyone here in Carson City that would like to testify in opposition of Assembly Bill 494? Seeing none, not seeing anyone at the table in Las Vegas, and knowing that we have not had anyone join us on the phone lines, we will move to the neutral position. Is there anyone here in Carson City that would like to testify in neutral on Assembly Bill 494? Seeing none and not seeing anyone come to the table in Las Vegas, and knowing we don't have anyone on the phone lines, I'll ask the presenters if you have any closing comments. The answer is no, so therefore we will close the hearing on Assembly Bill 494 and open the hearing on Assembly Bill 224. Good evening. You can start whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I am Sarah Peters. For the record, I represent Assembly District 24 in Reno, Nevada, inclusive of the University of Nevada. I'm proud today to present to you AB 224, which introduces collective bargaining in the NRS for our NG professional employees. AB 224 authorizes collective bargaining for Nevada System of Higher Education or Education professional employees, extending their right to negotiate for working conditions and establish formal processes to assist the parties in reaching agreement. Under AB 224, collective bargaining agreements negotiated between NG professionals and their college or university administrations would be subject to approval by the Board of Regents. If a provision of a collective bargaining agreement requires state funding, the budget request would go through the normal state budgeting process, starting with the agency request from NSHE. The governor would be free to put the funding in the executive budget or not, and the legislature would be free to fund it in the budget or not. The fiscal notes are for administrative costs. I will ask Dr. Irvin to address the fiscal notes. Also, please note that a conceptual amendment has been submitted to address one of the fiscal notes.
Good evening, Kent Irvin, State President, Nevada Faculty Alliance. Thank you for hearing our bill. The NFA has submitted a detailed written analysis of the 4 fiscal notes. The fiscal note from the Employee Management Relations Board for assessment revenue from NSHE is accurate. The fiscal note from the Division of Human Resource Management, DHRM, duplicates labor relations activities that NSHE should do on its own per AB 224 and that NSHE indicates it plans to do in their own fiscal note. The amendment addresses the division of responsibilities, and I believe will remove that fiscal note. The fiscal note from the Attorney General will be triggered only if NSHE requests legal services related to AB 224 from the Office of the Attorney General, resulting in an assessment to NSHE rather than NSHE using its own in-house general counsel for labor relations activities. We believe the fiscal note from NSHE exaggerates the cost of AB 224 because NSHE incorrectly assumes a new centralized labor relations unit would be needed instead of continuing the practice of negotiating contracts at the institutional level. Second, NSHE overestimates the number of new bargaining units that would likely form in the next biennium. And thirdly, NSHE overestimates the number of arbitrations resulting from grievances. Our written submission, which is on Nellis, documents each of those points. We appreciate that NSHE has reduced their fiscal note from $4.2 million originally to $1.9 million currently. If the committee wishes to fund the full fiscal note from NSHE, that's certainly fine. But we believe, based on the evidence we have presented, that reducing it by a factor of 2 to 4 for the next biennium would still be adequate for supporting AB 224. The conceptual amendment, which on Nellis is at the end of the analysis about the fiscal note, clarifies that NSHE and its institutions are expected to handle labor relations actively internally rather than outsourcing to the state DHRM, which addresses that fiscal note. The amendment also addresses other stakeholder concerns. I would be happy to answer any questions. Thank you. And would you like us to go through the amendments?
If you could go through the amendment, that would be great.
I just want to make a real quick statement before we move on to the amendments. This is Sarah Peters for the record. We have appreciated NSHE's continued engagement and involvement in the bill, particularly Mr. Klinger and Mr. Rodriguez. We've had several lively conversations, including discussions of NSHE's policy amendments, for which changes have been added to the bill in several places, both in the policy committee and as presented today. The statement in the letter from NSHE that we have rejected the amendment as a whole is false, and I don't appreciate that that is in the record, so I wanted to correct that we have worked and adopted several of the amendments that were presented, as is how negotiation works in this building. So before we move into the amendment, I wanted to make sure that I clarified that.
Thank you so much for that clarification. I appreciate it.
So the conceptual amendment is offered to address fiscal notes and stakeholder concerns. It's the 2 pages at the end of that document on Nellis. The first amends subsection 5 of section 51. This is where there's the main part of section 51 in the general case allows the labor relation unit of the Division of Human Resource Management to provide labor relations services, but except for as provided in the subsection 5. And what we've done here is just expand it so it's clear that NSHE, as the entity with the authority to fix salaries and establish policies and procedures for professional employees at NSHE, would carry out all of those activities. The second is a deletion of section 21, which are provisions that The professional employee, in this case NSHE, would provide employees contact information in the bargaining unit so they can carry out their, the professional organization can carry out the duties. NSHE asked for this to be deleted, and we're concerned about keeping the employee contact information confidential. Although we believe it's important for professional organizations to be able to contact the members of their bargaining units, and that's one of the responsibilities that professional organizations have. We do agree that confidentiality is important and just felt that it would be hard to put that all in statute, and so we're deleting it and leaving it up to negotiation. Third item is to amend Section 25. Section 25 generally addresses representation rights, so-called Weingarten rights, that when an employee is brought into a disciplinary investigation, they have the ability to have a representative with them to help them out in that process. We think that is a good thing. It helps. It's one of the things that helps resolve issues at the lowest possible level. And she expressed concerns that the detailed processes here would interfere with NSHE's existing policies for disciplinary investigations. And although, of course, statute can override those things, what we've done, those internal policies, we've taken out all the sort of details here of timelines and details of how that works and left in the general proposition that a employee does have the right to have someone represent them during one of these investigations, and anything else would be up to a collective bargaining negotiation. And finally, the fourth one is deleting one of the mandatory subjects of negotiation, and it's in Section 33, subsection 2, paragraph O, deleting the subject of negotiation over no strike provisions consistent with the provisions of this chapter, and that's at the request of NSHE also.
Thank you. There's a lot here. And Assemblywoman Peters, I want to thank you for all the work that you've put into this. I know you've been working on this for months to get us to this hearing, so thank you for that. Before we go to questions, could a representative from NSHE come up and just speak to the revised fiscal note? There's been conversation from the bill sponsor about the fiscal note, so if you could just come up, and then if I could also get the Department of Human Resource Management and the Office of the Attorney General, just to speak on each one of your fiscal notes, that would be great.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, Andrew Klinger, Chief Financial Officer for Nevada System of Higher Education, and then with me I also have NSHE Deputy General Counsel Carrie Parker with me, who has also put a lot of time and effort into preparing the fiscal note. And I guess first I would say I do want to thank Assemblywoman Peters for her willingness to give us an opportunity to engage in discussions, and we have had several discussions about not only the policy of the bill but also the fiscal note, and I think, as was pointed out, we have revised the fiscal note a couple of times. And really what we see the need for the fiscal note is just the increasing sort of scope of what this bill covers compared to what we have in current policy. Just the increase in the number of bargaining units, the number of employees, the complexity of those. And so the fiscal note, the reduced fiscal note that's before you, asks for 7 positions over the 2 years. We have adjusted it to, in the first year, 5 positions would start in January of '24, and then in '27 we would add 2 more positions to a labor relations unit within the system administration office. There's also some operating expenses and arbitration costs included in the fiscal note as well. And we did spend time, or I should say Ms. Parker spent time reviewing and looking at what the Labor Relations Unit had submitted previously for their fiscal note, as well as doing research and having discussions with the Attorney General's office on just what the time and effort has been in their experience with classified employee collective bargaining. So I think the fiscal note, where it's at today, and again, I appreciate the bill sponsor for working with us, and I think where it's at today, it is a much better fiscal note than it was when we first started, because we have made some adjustments and refinements to it, and I'd be happy to answer any questions or defer them to Deputy Counsel Parker.
Thank you. And you said there would be 5 positions in FY24 and then 2 in 25?
Madam Chair, for the record, Andrew Klinger, that's correct. So 5, the way the fiscal note is put together now, 5 positions that would start in January of 2024, so half of fiscal year 24, and then 2 additional positions for a total of 7 that would start in fiscal year 25.
Thank you. And you mentioned that there would be a number of bargaining units. What's that number, and how did you determine what the amount of the bargaining units and how you got there?
Deputy General Counsel Carrie Parker, for the record. AB 224 creates a presumption that there would be bargaining units per institution, and also states that supervisors would not be in the same unit as those they supervise, and there are 8 institutions, so that's how we arrived at 16. Madam Chair, if I may, it's an estimate. There could also be more based on the bill defining the bargaining unit as having a sufficient community of interest. So the definition of professional employee encompasses a lot of different types of employees. So it could be possible that, for example, graduate assistants might be in a different bargaining unit than professors. It would depend on how they organize and what they put forth for their unit.
Okay. I have a few more questions, but there are a few members that have questions. We'll go to Assemblyman Watts next.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I appreciate some of the clarification on the updated staffing projections. Can you, and this might have been in some of the backup, but can you just detail a little bit? So obviously there is some bargaining that is taking place currently, I believe at CSN, TMCC, WNC, and I think that happens at the institutional level. So do you have any information on how many positions are involved in that? Are those positions focused on collective bargaining exclusively, and if not, what amount of staff time is dedicated to the collective bargaining activities that currently exist within the system?
Deputy General Counsel Carrie Parker, for the record. I don't have a specific number of hours that are spent. The agreements are bargained every 2 years, and I'm aware that there are HR, I think the director of HR, I could be wrong, from each institution. Then there are volunteers brought in who have other functions, people, experts from the subject matter that may come in, and then the bargaining occurs. TMCC has a general counsel who is also, I think, the general counsel for WNC. And then College of Southern Nevada has their own general counsel. Does that answer your question?
Yes, I think that does. So there's positions. It sounds like this is one of their responsibilities among others, and then they kind of bring some folks in. Is that a fair generalization?
Deputy General Counsel Carrie Parker, for the record, that's correct. And the reason that we're asking for more is because while there are 3 collective bargaining units right now, this would expand the number of units, the number of employees covered, and it also requires more expertise in labor relations, as well as labor specializing attorneys. Each time that the DHRM Labor Relations Unit has submitted a fiscal note, they've tied it to the number of units, the topics of bargaining. And so what we've noticed is an average, when there are 2 bargaining units created by a bill, LRU tends to ask for 1 FTE, and also a new topic of bargaining usually results in an LRU fiscal note for 1 additional FTE. So we did look at the LRU fiscal notes and how they've come up with, their formula for what would be required.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And again, I won't dwell too much on the estimates. I think you very clearly stated your reasoning behind the estimates for the bargaining units that would be created. The other thing that you mentioned was the creation of this centralized labor relations team at the system office. Is there a part of the bill that actually creates that I'm missing, or is that the system's understanding or interpretation of the best way to implement the provisions of this bill?
Deputy General Counsel Carrie Parker for the record. The bill increases the number of units and the topics, and it's to answer your question directly, NSHE's interpretation of the best way, most efficiently to implement this bill is to have centralized collective bargaining similar to the state, who has the LRU. And so what you can accomplish through that centralized collective bargaining is, like we've seen in the CBA's collective bargaining agreements that were recently approved by the BOE for the next biennium, is that each collective bargaining agreement has similar language. For example, they put in COLAs into the multiple collective bargaining agreements, and that's how you can create consistency across the institutions if we have a centralized team. Also, if we were to add an additional attorney and an additional labor relations expert to each institution, that would be more staff than we're asking for today.
Assemblywoman Anderson.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for bringing forward the bill, Assemblymember Peters, and then also the fiscal note information. I have 2 questions. The first has to do with the actual breakdown from the hard copy that we received. Was there reasoning behind under both fiscal year 2024 with the operating cost that the professional development is the same amount as office supplies, when it appears that professional development is very different from what you have been doing in the past? Or was that just a number that was utilized in other ways? I feel it's kind of odd to have office supplies be the same amount as the professional development when it appears that that is something that would be needed, desperately so.
Madam Chair, for the record, Andrew Klinger through you to Assemblywoman Anderson. I think that is just a coincidence, I suppose, that they're the same number, and really the professional development would be for trainings. I mean, obviously, labor relations is a sort of a specialty field, and certainly that would be needed for training.
Thank you, and I would agree that it just was a coincidence. I just thought very interesting. But the larger question for me, which you have touched upon as well, has to do with the mandatory arbitration and the anticipation. It's important, I do care greatly about unions. I've been through some different areas with it. 25 grievances per year is a pretty high amount. Does this mean that is there no anticipation of attempts to clarify the complaints before it goes straight to grievances? Or is that going to be part of the process that is part of the collective bargaining agreement?
Deputy General Counsel Carrie Parker, we would absolutely hope to resolve grievances at the lowest level possible. Our estimate of the number of grievances is based on the complaints and grievances we're aware of, as well as the increased number of employees who would have access to bargaining, the increased number of collective bargaining agreements, the expanded scope of bargaining, and what we've observed through employees having access to union representation.
Thank you, Chair. So with that follow-up, based upon the number of complaints, how many complaints have there been in the last year and or 2 years without the current language? How many complaints have you been experiencing with these individuals?
Madam Chair, Deputy General Counsel Carrie Parker, for the record. Unfortunately, we don't have an accurate system of tracking, so it's a process of asking the HR and then asking the faculty senate and trying to figure it out. So right now for the faculty, it varies by institution. I think the highest institution that I saw ranged between 25 and 30, and then the smallest was 0 to 2. So it kind of ranged within them. So we're kind of extrapolating and trying to figure out what it would be, because the current people who have access to this process are only the faculty, and we only have 3 collective bargaining agreements in effect. If I would, even if we were to use the NFA's estimates of grievances, theirs have ranged. I've heard different numbers through various communications with the NFA, so we're all just trying to figure out and anticipate what it might be with this increased scope of bargaining and the increased number of employees. And I understand your question, and I'm not trying to be evasive. I did ask those questions, and that was the best I could come up with.
Thank you, Chair, and I understand that this is a crystal ball situation, and I do also appreciate the footnote on number from the page 3 of 4, the little footnote that has to do with that explanation about it. But I just want to make it known, I guess, or clear, and this is not a question, this is more of a statement. I feel that that's pretty high, and that has to do with possible professional development, which goes back to my first question, and the training that is needed from both management as well as union representation, and that it be both sides participating in this training. So this way it is not quite that many grievances in a yearly process. So thank you for that indulgence, Chair.
Thank you. Anyone else? Questions on the INCHI fiscal note? All right, see none. Thank you. Good evening. How are you?
Good evening, Madam Chair and Committee. For the record, Mandy Bosmith, Administrator for the Division of Human Resource Management in the Department of Administration. The DHRM submitted a fiscal note for the language that was first introduced, that was initially introduced for AB 224. In some of the lively conversations mentioned by Assemblywoman Peters, we were able to get to an agreement with the Nevada Faculty Alliance whereby we hope that the DHRM will not be called upon to engage in primary negotiations on behalf of the Board of Regents or on behalf of any INCHI institution to enter into a CBA with the Nevada Faculty Alliance. We are satisfied with the language put forward to you tonight as a conceptual amendment, that should relieve the DHRM of any responsibility with respect to negotiations. We certainly are here for consultation, and I'll make up some hourly number when that happens. But we are satisfied that we can remove our fiscal note if that conceptual amendment is included in the language.
Thank you so much. And when you get an opportunity, if you could get that to us in writing, I can add that to our file. That would be wonderful. Thank you. There is one question I did have for INCHI before we move on to the Attorney General's office. With the conceptual amendment that was presented tonight, would that have an effect on your fiscal note?
Madam Chair, for the record, Chief Financial Officer Andrew Klinger, the revision or the amendment does not change our fiscal note.
Okay, thank you. Good evening.
Good evening, Teresa Benitez Thompson for the record, representing Office of Attorney General. So our note is presented. It's based on 2,200 hours of time when we went back to look at what excuse me, our office's total time and effort as recorded through our time tracking system looked like. So this would be cost allocation. This is not general fund dollars. Section 52 does have the language that says that the Attorney General's office may be used in this. So we may be used, and if so, then we imagine that these are the resources that might be needed. And so right now, our Government Natural Resources Division is a little bit precariously positioned because when we stood up the state's labor relations unit, that did not come with an appropriation of attorneys to it. So right now we have 1.5 attorneys who are working on it, and that's kind of the capacity. We're at max capacity. So if we got additional work in through this NSHE channel, then you would see us appear and say, help, we need more resources. In this unit, we only have 1 legal secretary right now to about 11 attorneys, and we try to have, I think, 1 legal secretary to 2 or 3 attorneys. So that's where you might see us pop up and say, we need additional help and resources if the work did come this way, if they use Section 52, utilizing the Attorney General's office.
Thank you for that. I'm hoping with the wonderful compensation packet that this fiscal committee has put together, you'll be easier for you to hire new legal secretaries to help out in that manner.
For the record, Chief of Staff Teresa Benitez Thompson, to the chair and to the committee as a whole, wonderfully, happily so. I imagine that we could fill that position in a much easier way than we've been able to fill them before, and with a grateful and thankful heart would be able to do so.
Thank you. Members, any questions? Okay, seeing none. Then I will invite the bill sponsor back to the table.
Sarah Peters, for the record, I just want to clarify a few things. I have dove into this fiscal note situation in ways I never thought I would before. My first session was 2019 when we stood up our own executive branch, DHRM, Labor Relations Unit offices, and I dove into what the asks were at the time. And I think that, as you heard from several of the presenters, there's a lot of unknown out there, right, of what is this going to look like? How many collective bargaining units are we going to have? How much time will that take? What will those look like outside of the institution structures? How will this affect the allocations, which is the process that we at the state use to fund these positions? How would the NSHE institutions do that, and how do they do it currently? And so, in diving into fiscal notes, specifically related to that 2019 piece of legislation, the 2019 allocation from this committee was 2 positions to the state to figure out how this was all going to work. And then in August of the following year, or that same year, there was a work program that presented a plan moving forward, which included several other positions, as well as the allocation process that they would use to fund those positions. And so I don't know how that would all work with NSHE, and it was not a part of our discussions, nor was it a part of their amended fiscal note. But I think it is worth considering that because of the variety of unknowns, there is a path forward in which we could ask that, or this body could ask that, and she come up with a plan and dive into this in a different way than hiring 3 lawyers who are well versed in the legal implications of collective bargaining, and considering the NFA as an adversarial body against them, and instead work together to figure out a way to move forward with collective bargaining being the standard of practice for hiring professional employees at the state of Nevada.
Thank you so much for that. I think that is a great idea moving forward before we go to the work session of this bill. So I think there's a little bit more conversation that needs to go on. Bill will get a work session. We want to get it right before we get to that point. So I thank you so much for your presentation and for everyone answering on your fiscal notes. I appreciate that. And with that, we will move to testimony in support of Assembly Bill 224. Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Jim New. I'm a community college professor and the incoming president of the Nevada Faculty Association. In 1992, TMCC became the first college in Nevada approved for collective bargaining under the existing Board of Regents policy. We have negotiated since then 9 agreements, and I have been at the table for 5 of those negotiations, both as an administrator and as a faculty member. The NSHE fiscal note is based on the premise that there will be an immediate burst of more than a dozen new bargaining units. Believe me, NFA would be elated if that was true, but we know it's not. New bargaining units will emerge over a matter of years, not weeks or months. I agree with NSHE. They need new staffing that will be necessary to effectively administer collective bargaining, but their request is 5 or 10 years too early. It will take us that much time to get new bargaining units on board. Coinciding with the instantaneous appearance of new bargaining units, NSHE also expects a virtual explosion of grievances driven by collective bargaining. But 3 decades of history at TMCC directly contradicts these claims. At TMCC, the average number of grievances filed by faculty is less than 3 per year. And that number is declining thanks to new contract language emphasizing informal resolution of disputes at the lowest possible level. It's working. In the last academic year, there were 0 grievances. Of the 13 grievances filed by faculty members over the last 5 years, not one was found in favor of the faculty by NSHE, forcing 2 of them into costly litigation. The faculty member prevailed in one, and the other is still pending. Despite the claims, binding arbitration will be rare, and when it does occur, it will be substantially less costly than litigation. Collective bargaining conducted in good faith results in benefits for both management and labor, including greater efficiency, a reduction of grievances, and cost savings. And I urge you to vote in favor of Assembly Bill 224. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Doug Unger, D-O-U-G, UNGER, Nevada Faculty Alliance. Thank you, Chair Monroe Moreno, Vice Chair Bacchus, and members of the committee for your consideration of support for AB 224. From statewide surveys, we know 82% of our faculty want collective bargaining rights like those in AB 224. We continue to work to resolve any outstanding issues with NSHE, and I want to make it clear that we're like one big family within NSHE. The Nevada Faculty Alliance is not opposed. We are almost always in support of what NSHE does, and I feel like we're getting there. Nevertheless, the exaggerated fiscal note NSHE has attached to the bill imagines costs at least 3 or 4 more times than are reasonable for the next biennium. These inflated projections are addressed by Dr. Irvin and the NFA point by point with careful citations, math, and scholarship. I'd like to add further evidence that NSHE's estimated 25 to 100 grievances each year per institution is wildly inaccurate. At UNLV from 2007 to 2019, our Faculty Senate processed 32 grievances, or 2.7 per year on average, only 5 making it through the hearing process to the President's desk. That is the number most likely for arbitration under AB 224. Nothing in the bill takes away the Faculty Senate grievance process. Even quadrupling this average to account for new categories of employees who may join bargaining units adds up to less than 2 arbitrations per year at our state's largest campus. Also, please consider how NSHE does not note the high expenses our colleges and universities incur from litigations and settlements due to personnel issues that could be resolved through arbitration. I'll bet those legal costs are eye-opening. That's one of the savings our research indicates collective bargaining can achieve, along with other new efficiencies that should improve outcomes for students and as well faculty morale, commitment, and stability. In considering these fiscal notes, we respectfully ask the committee to focus on what's reasonable from evidence and most demonstrably true. We hope this bill and our faculty have earned your support. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else here in Carson City that'd like to testify in support? Seeing none. Not seeing anyone at the table in Las Vegas to testify in support of Assembly Bill 224 BPS. Have we had anyone join us on the phone lines?
Chair, the line is open and working, but there are no callers at this time.
Thank you so much. Then we will move to opposition. Is there anyone here in Carson City that would like to testify in opposition of Assembly Bill 224? Seeing none and not seeing anyone come up to the table in Las Vegas, and knowing we do not have anyone on the phone lines, we will move to neutral. Is there anyone here in Carson City that would like to testify in the neutral position on Assembly Bill 224? Seeing none. And we do have one person in Las Vegas. Welcome.
Good evening, Chair and committee members. My name is Bruce Snyder. I'm the Commissioner of the Employee Management Relations Board, which would administer the law. We have a small fiscal note, and the thing I wanted to emphasize is that after analyzing our role in the process, we have adequate staff, equipment, and supplies to administer the law. The 825 employees who currently have collective bargaining, as compared to the 108,000 we currently serve, would add less than 1% increase in our workload. And even if a lot of the employees in NGE someday end up with collective bargaining, we anticipate that our workload would increase by no more than 8%. So we think that we have this covered with the 3 employees that work for the EMRB right now. We have 3 employees. Thank you. I'll answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Members, do you have any questions? Seeing none, but thank you. I appreciate you sharing that information. That you have 3 employees, and you believe with those 3 employees, you'll be able to take on these additional, possible additional members that may have to utilize your services.
Yes, but you have to understand our role may be different than what the role would be from the institutions who also have to manage it. But from our role of doing bargaining unit determinations and who is to represent the employees and unfair labor practice cases, we have the resources already on hand to handle that.
Thank you so much. Any final words? All right. Seeing nothing else from the bill sponsor, we will close the hearing on Assembly Bill 224. That brings us to the next thing on our agenda, members, and that will be a work session for Assembly Bill 498, and I will turn it over to our fiscal analyst.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, Sarah Kaufman, Legislative Counsel Bureau. AB 498 was heard by Ways and Means yesterday, May 22nd. Assembly Bill 498 revises the contribution rates for the state employees from a rate equal to that paid by the employer of a participating state agency to 1/2 of the normal cost that is actuarially determined for police officers and firefighters for regular members, depending on the retirement fund in which the member is participating. The bill revises the employer contribution rate for a participating state agency to a total contribution rate less the employee contribution rate of 1/2 of the normal cost for state employees. I would note that if approved, the AB 498, there was a mock-up amendment that was provided. The mock-up amendment within Section 8 of the amendment proposed to set the contribution rate specific to the Nevada System of Higher Education Retirement Plan Alternative, which is provided for in NRS 286-808, to mirror the rate in which it was budgeted through the appropriations of the NGE budgets of 17.5%. I would also note that Second Amendment would need to be provided for, which would incorporate the costs associated with this piece of legislation. And for that, it would be in fiscal year 2024, $105,076,744 in fiscal year 2024, and general fund appropriations of $85,000,000 $663,824. And for highway fund appropriations for fiscal year 2024 of $19,263,280. And for fiscal year 2025, it would be $20,703,524. Madam Chair, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much. Members, any questions for Ms. Kaufman? Seeing none, then I will accept a motion to amend and do pass.
Madam Chair, I would move to amend and do pass Assembly Bill 498.
I have a motion from Assemblywoman Bacchus, a second from Assemblywoman Peters. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? We have a nay from Assemblywoman Dickman, Assemblyman Hafen, Assemblywoman Kasama, and Assemblyman O'Neill. The motion does pass. Thank you all. That is the last item before public comment. If we have anyone here in Carson City that would like to give public comment, I invite you to come to the table. If you're in Las Vegas, you'd like to give public comment, come to the table. I'll take the floor statement. And not seeing anyone here in Carson City and not seeing anyone come to the table in Las Vegas. BPS, do we have anyone joining us on the phone line that would like to give public comment?
Chair, the line is open and working, but there are no callers at this time.
Thank you so much. So members, with that, that's our last item. I will see you bright and early in the morning. We'll probably have another long day with a few Ways Committee hearings. So I will see you in the morning. This meeting is adjourned. I will see you on the floor. You're right. So I'll see you in like 10 minutes on the floor. This meeting's adjourned.